to the outside world. 27-year-old Keeley McGrath is a young mum living her happy ever after life.
Keeley was quite independent, feisty, quite willing to do things on her own.
I've got a video of her actually in labour with the youngest child, and she was in pain but laughing.
She always seemed happy. We'd always go out and have a laugh.
But behind closed doors, a different story.
He dictated everything that she was allowed to do.
She had to make sure the house was clean, his tea was cooked, getting the kids ready, taking them to nursery.
Police gather evidence until a picture of a suspect emerges.
How did she get from the bottom of the stairs to there? So why is there broken glass in the kitchen? Why are there family picture frames smashed? Why are they removed from the wall?
Which piece of the puzzle will identify a killer with nothing left to lose?
It was either she was his or nobody else was going to have her.
What will be a killer's mistake?
I'm Temporary Chief Inspector Toby Fawcett-Greaves of Derbyshire Constabulary, and I was the Senior Investigating Officer in charge of the investigation. On the morning of the 13th of December 2018, Derbyshire Police received a call from East Midlands Ambulance Service reporting that they had been called to attend an address in South Normanton. They had some concerns around the circumstances.
First responders are called to the home of Keeley McGrath, Anthony Tony Davis and their 3 children. According to Tony, Keeley's been in a terrible accident.
Tony Davis had come home in the early hours of the morning and found that Keeley had fallen down the stairs and sustained a series of injuries as a result.
Keeley and Tony live in a small village just outside Bolsover in Derbyshire, England. Very quickly, the neighbours believe something is wrong.
South Normanton itself, it is quite a small village. It's not huge. Obviously, you don't ever expect anything like that to happen to somebody, especially somebody you know.
I got loads of missed calls saying that there was loads of police and everything up at the house. And I just walked downstairs to my stepdad and said, Keeley will be dead when I get there.
At the house, police begin locking down the scene.
Management of the crime scene really involves getting everybody out. We've got a number of people present. Davis, certainly the youngest of the children. The ambulance crew was still there, and some close friends of Davis had also attended at his request prior to calling the ambulance.
There was about 10 police cars. All the road was blue taped off. I just said to the police officer, what's happening? He said, don't worry, the kids are fine. I am afraid Keeley's passed away. Obviously, I started crying, asking where Tony was. And they was like, why do you need to know that? I was like, because he'd have done it.
Investigating Officer Forster Greaves also has his suspicions about Tony. Whatever had happened to Keeley, it doesn't look like an accident.
The paramedics were concerned at the extent of injuries they'd found on Keeley, the position that they'd found her lying in, which is away from the bottom of the stairs, the demeanour of Davis at the time. This very quickly turned into a crime scene rather than a simple death investigation.
Police begin the painstaking process of piecing together the evidence from the scene and building a picture of the family's life in their South Normanton home.
We needed to learn everything we possibly could about Keeley, which essentially is identifying all the salient points of her life, which was, 30 years of life. We've got to pull all that in together.
Keeley McGrath grew up in a close-knit and loving family. Mum, dad and baby sister.
Well, I was in the army, and so we moved around quite a lot. We spent a couple of years in Germany, then back to England, then back to Germany again. So they were used to moving around, used to moving schools.
Growing up on army bases, Keeley quickly develops an adventurous spirit.
She was a bit of a tomboy. She had a garage that she liked playing with. She'd always get her garage out when she came home from play school. Played outside a lot. She liked being outside.
Keeley was quite independent, feisty, quite willing to do things on her own.
She had wonderful friends who, even now will tell me that she was so funny.
Growing up in a disciplined environment around the army, Keeley doesn't always respond well to authority.
When she was 12, she became a bit disruptive.
She wanted to go out and work, didn't get on very well with school, didn't like authority very much, and so was keen to leave school and make her own way as soon as she could, and she did exactly that.
At 16, Keeley leaves school and gets a job on the army base. Away from the classroom, with more independence, she seems happier.
There was an officer's mess, so she got a job doing waitressing there, and she got up every morning at like 3:30 in the morning to go to work at 6:30 to put her makeup on, and that was what she needed to do. She loved work.
She didn't miss her days, and I think it just fitted in more with her independence.
When Keeley is 19 years old, she falls hard for her first boyfriend.
In her first relationship, she had 2 children, and they were together for 3 or 4 years.
Although Keeley seems to love being a mum, she's still very young. Her relationship with her children's father breaks down.
She met up with what then became her second relationship while she was still involved in the first.
And she was very young, so she did have postnatal depression. She did hide it to a certain extent from us. I only found that out a few years ago.
Despite struggling with her mental health, independent Keeley is still determined to chart her own course. When her children's father gains full custody of their 2 children, Keeley moves away.
She'd moved up to Derbyshire with her second partner, who she went on to marry.
Now married, Keeley is 150 miles away from her family when the relationship becomes difficult.
I just wanted her to come home. She was so far away. I just wanted her to come home.
For 2 years, Keeley's close family hear nothing from her. Then one day, she reaches out.
She actually made contact with Claire's mum, so her grandmother, wanted to come and see her, which we think, it was an obvious sort of olive branch, if you like, for us to start mending relationships.
So I asked her to ask if I could go and see her as well, because I hadn't seen her for 2 years.
The family's over the moon to be reunited, but a lot has changed in Keeley's life. She has a new partner and a new baby.
He was about a month old, so I met her and the baby, and it was like no time had been apart. It's like I'd seen her all the time, and she seemed really happy then.
And she just seemed a lot calmer. She seemed a lot more content. She didn't seem as if she was looking for anything anymore.
Her family is relieved to see Keeley happy, but with her difficult relationship history, Keeley appears still vulnerable. In 35-year-old Tony Davis, Keeley seems to have found the partner she needs.
We thought, well, she's finally settled. He's providing. She's happy. They've got their family. We can relax.
He worked hard. He owned his own business. He owned a number of houses, which of course don't mean that he was a nice guy, but it gives a sense of a well-rounded individual.
He is respected, he's people's landlord, he's a businessman. His dad before him owned land and houses and businesses that Anthony now owns. And so in a community, that's somebody who is well known, but is also well known with an air of authority and respectability.
But later, when Detective Inspector Fawcett Greaves begins looking into Tony Davis, he finds something sinister lurking behind the respectable facade.
Martin and Claire didn't know. There was no reason for them to know that this was happening. They trusted him.
We had the conversation. I was like, look, you are going to end up dead if you don't get out of this.
If only she'd said she could have moved down here, we've got room, she could have lived with us. It would have been hard, but what's the alternative? Living without her.
At 27 years old, Keeley's parents believe she is finally in a healthy and stable relationship with Tony Davis, father to her 3 children. She seems to enjoy being a homemaker.
Her parents, I think they got a sense that he was a stabilising factor.
She seemed happy. She'd come and visit us probably once a month. She cooked us a meal while she was here. She'd never done that, even when she was at home. She was never in for meals, she was always out.
She appeared to quite like being the housewife, if that's the right term, looking after the children, cooking the meals and all that sort of stuff.
While speaking to Keeley's parents after their daughter's death, Inspector Fawcett Greaves uncovers what he considers to be the first red flag. Her parents have very little insight into the relationship. Despite being close with Keeley, they had very rarely met Tony Davis.
I only met him 3 times, and each time very briefly. First time was when he dropped Keeley off down here. Keeley had just given birth to their second child.
Davis would regularly not turn up on visits.
The second Christmas after we'd got back in touch with her, they were coming for Christmas Day. And I was so excited because all the family were going to be there. And it wasn't until Christmas Eve she said, he won't come. He said he only gets a couple of days off, he wants to spend it at home, so he won't come.
We thought that was odd. And we thought that, you might want to get to know your partner's parent to some extent. So we were a bit surprised when he didn't stay.
He was almost allowed to do that because it was seen as what a businessman would do. He's keeping her, she's the mum with the small children, and he's the busy man of the house that's out being the breadwinner.
In the years that they were together, he and I were probably in the same room for an hour and a half, 2 hours, over 4 years or so.
In the hours following Keeley's death, police begin assessing Tony Davis as a suspect. Statistically, the primary suspect in domestic killings is usually the partner. And very quickly, it becomes clear that all is not what it seems with Tony Davis.
We did a very broad examination of him, his life, his interests, his financial affairs, what his work looked like, what any prior involvement with the police had looked like. It became evident that he was a bit of a wannabe gangster. He had a lot of friends who were known to the police previously, didn't paint him as a stand-up citizen. Within the sort of first 12 to 24 hours, we will have very quickly identified who the associates were.
Police believe they have enough concerns raised by the initial examination of Davis's affairs, so the investigation turns to his finances. And detectives are immediately suspicious of an apparent contradiction.
He had a large amount of cash in the bank, and he lived in a very modest end-terraced house with the family.
The house they lived in was pretty basic. It was small, quite old, not particularly well maintained. It was clean, because Keeley kept it clean.
Kitchen, sitting room downstairs. Stairs were in the sitting room, and then it was 2 floors above that. So there was 2 bedrooms, bathroom, and then the 3rd floor was just a bedroom. But it was very small. Stairs were very narrow, not a family home at all.
It's not for us to judge how a person should spend their money, but the type of person he was, the assets he had available, it did appear strange.
Despite all of that money coming in, it wasn't really showing up. There was never any ambition from Anthony to move out, get a larger property, make that life easier for Keeley.
The house next door was empty because Keeley said he didn't want to live next door to anybody.
Nobody lived next door. She used to just keep all her rubbish next door.
Despite their home, Tony and Keeley always appear to have money to burn.
She always had cash. She's always spending it on everybody.
He was flash. He wanted to present as the successful businessman. He wanted to present as the affluent individual. And that's just how he behaved.
Dad, Martin, remembers an unusual conversation.
Talking about business, and he commented on how much cash his business generates. And he asked me for my advice on how he should deal with that cash. Laundering, basically. Again, I commented to Claire on the way home as to why he thought I might know how to launder his business cash. We laughed about it. So that was the only concern that we had, was over his financial dealings.
Detective Inspector Fawcett Greaves has other concerns about Tony Davis. He learns that this is not the first time police have been called to this address.
We suspected prior domestic abuse. And there had been at least one prior call to Derbyshire Police regarding a domestic incident between Keeley and Davis.
With evidence to suggest that everything was not as it seemed for Keeley and Tony, police make an important decision with the investigation.
There's a difficult decision to be made in the early stages of a homicide investigation, which is declaring an individual as a suspect. That's a big call to make, and the risks with that come if you identify somebody as a suspect and subsequently you eliminate them from the inquiry. The defence could then potentially use that. But it was later in the evening, on the 13th, that the decision was made to declare him formally as a suspect.
Within hours, Tony Davis becomes the prime suspect in Keeley's murder. Investigators now work to piece together what life was like for her behind closed doors.
We know that there was at least one incident where Keeley sustained an injury and she asked a friend to look after the children while she took herself to hospital.
Jessica Taylor is a psychologist who specialises in instances of domestic violence and controlling relationships. For her, it's not surprising that people were fooled by Davis's act.
They're presented with, this perfect relationship, this domesticated version of Keeley. She's at home with the children, looking after the home, looking after the kids. She's a traditional housewife. And you can see why observers, people that maybe didn't understand everything that was going on, would see that as really positive.
Police turn their attention to Keeley's friends. What do they know about the couple's relationship? Laura Mosley knows both Keeley and Tony Davis from her job at the local pub.
I first met Keeley about 7 years ago, where I used to work behind the bar. She used to come in with Tony after he finished work. Yeah, they seemed a happy couple. Tony used to have about 30 Budweiser every night, and Keeley wouldn't be far behind with blue WKDs.
Laura and Keeley become close friends.
She had the baby, and I went round to see him, and then ever since then we just went out for dinner and went shopping.
She loved going out with her friends. You could tell she was in for a good night. She was absolutely going to love every minute of it.
Kaylee Holmes met Keeley at the hairdresser's where she works.
She was a regular client in the salon. Obviously, you're with somebody for quite a while, and for such a long period of time, you do tend to talk and chat about things. So you can always tell if something's going off in somebody's life. So we end up being more like mini counsellors, more so than anything.
Although Keeley rarely complains about her partner, those around her notice a concerning pattern. Davis seems to control Keeley.
She always came across as it was very much, if he says so, then it's okay. She often said how much she missed her parents and the fact that obviously her children didn't see them as often. And it was certain things that she'd say, like she didn't get to see her parents so much. It was little things like that that then you would pick up on, and it was more like she was told she can't.
Keeley was controlled, I think, in every way. Completely hidden to the public eye, financially controlled, emotionally controlled. He dictated everything that she was allowed to do.
It is really common when you're in an abusive relationship as a woman, especially when you've got kids as well, to feel a lot of shame about admitting almost that your relationship is abusive, that it's not what it looks like from the outside.
But close friend Laura has an intimate insight into the relationship.
Tony never looked like the romantic man. Just all he wanted to do was work, make money, keep having kids.
Davis clearly had a lack of respect for Keeley. She was a trophy bride, in my opinion, is how he treated her.
Not long after she met the couple, Laura witnesses a fight.
When we was at the Hawthorns once, we parked round the back and he come across just as we was walking in the pub, and I don't know what they were screaming at each other at, but he got her pinned up against the wall by her throat. And then he must have gone home, and yeah, she just sat crying in the pub. That's the first time I've really seen him grab her.
From there, it only gets worse.
She rang me up crying, saying that he'd beat her up that night. I went up there, she sat crying, she got massive bruises on her leg, saying that when she got home, he'd beat her up with a belt, made her sit up all night, and said that if she got a message off of a number, that wasn't saved in a phone, then he would have killed her then.
Aware of the horrific violence her friend is experiencing, Laura is in an impossible situation.
It was one of them, when the ambulance come, do you go out and say, look, she's going to tell you she's fell downstairs, but actually her boyfriend's beat her up. But then I didn't want to in case it affected the kids, because she'd never forgive me if they got took off her or anything.
After the tragedy of Keeley's death, police would realise the empty property Davis insisted on keeping next to their house served a sinister purpose.
The immediately adjacent address is also owned by Davis, and that was kept vacant, which I believe was in order to provide a sound buffer between his activity in the house and the nearest possible neighbours.
Laura tries to convince her friend that she needs to leave.
I'd ask her if she'd ever leave him, and she'd never really give me an answer.
If he's keeping her financially, what is she supposed to do? She has 3 small children. If she gets out from underneath him, where's the money going to come from? Where is the house going to come from? It's really, really difficult to leave an abusive situation like that.
I got the impression that it was either going to be she was his or nobody else was going to have her.
DI Fawcett Greaves is leading a multi-pronged investigation into the final days of Keeley McGrath. Forensic analysis of her phone reveals evidence of the horrific abuse that she has suffered.
Now, that phone evidence included images of Keeley with an injury, which she'd shared with a friend.
She said that he'd beat her up with a belt. She got a massive bruise on her leg, bruises down her face, just sat there crying. I don't know if he kicked her in the ribs, but that's what she ended up calling the ambulance for.
But in the weeks prior to her death, Keeley tells her friends that she's met someone who she believes will help her escape.
Keeley has started a relationship with a neighbour who lives several doors down.
It made her happy. It made her feel good about herself. All that she ever got off Tony was he'd come home from work, have sex with her, and then go back to work.
If you go home or at home, spend every hour at home in fear of a beating or worse, then it's not difficult to imagine that any affection would be welcome.
I think it was fairly readily obvious that that relationship was an opportunity for him and a get out for her.
I think she was seeing him for quite a while. Go and meet him while the kids were at nursery, in the car somewhere.
As Christmas approaches, Keeley drives to Hampshire to visit her family.
She came down to take her 2 older children to the pantomime and for me to look after the 3 younger ones.
She doesn't tell her parents about her difficult home life, but they can tell something is wrong.
She came back, went straight to bed, and was generally quiet throughout the weekend.
She seemed really quiet, not herself, but I thought, she had 3 children, under 3.5. She's just driven 3 hours, got 3 young children, she's tired.
While Keeley is enjoying a rest at her parents' house, Davis hears rumours about her affair.
Keeley phoned me one day saying that Tony rang her that one of his mates had seen her in a white Discovery with a man parked at the side of the road.
As soon as Davis became aware that this had taken place, he took himself away. He started planning a trip to Thailand. He went and bought a load of clothes, which certainly presented to me as not the actions of a man that wanted to resolve difficulties in his relationship. He was taunting Keeley by text that was his plan. He was going away.
And it wasn't until the Sunday morning, one of her younger children were playing with her phone, and she got a text message, and I saw it, and it implied that she was seeing someone.
Whilst Keeley is away, Anthony is aware of her relationship with that neighbour that lives a few doors down. And so that whole time she's away, he's thinking about that, stewing on it.
Keeley drives the 3 hours home to Derbyshire and back to Tony Davis.
She said she was leaving early because she had to go home and put her Christmas decorations up. She left about 11:30 in the morning, said bye, waved, drove off. That was the last time we saw her.
It became evident that that was how things had started.
On the Wednesday evening, he started texting Claire to say that she had been cheating on him and there'd been an argument.
Keeley's seeing someone else. I'm distraught. I can't believe it. I'm so upset. I did everything for her. So he then started texting Martin.
And to be honest, and this hurts now knowing, my text back to him was quite supportive of him, saying, we're here to help. We don't want to interfere, but we're here to help.
Throughout the day, Davis continued to involve Keeley's parents in their relationship issues. They are unaware of the danger that he poses to their daughter.
Davis is an extremely controlling individual, not just of Keeley, but of those in her close environment. People had succumbed to what he was telling them.
He also started to manipulate Keeley and tell her that her own mother had said, if that relationship breaks down, we wouldn't have you back here, we wouldn't look after you. Something that Keeley's mum had never said. But it's a way of cutting off that last avenue of support.
Tony Davis spends the night drinking in the pub. He's not responding to Keeley's messages.
I called her and she was really upset. Where is he? Where is he? I said, I don't know. He's just texted me. What are you playing at? Oh, you have no idea, Mum. And she hung up on me.
But he's still not home by the early hours of December the 13th. And so Keeley is texting him, trying to find out where he is.
I think around 1 a.m. he decided he was going to confront her about it.
I sent Keeley a couple of messages when I finished work, which she didn't reply to.
There was an app that told me where she was because she used to come down, drive down, so I knew where she was in the car and things. And the night before, when I went to bed at 10:30, it said she was at home. When I got up the next morning, she wasn't there anymore.
I messaged her when I went to work in the morning on WhatsApp, and it only had one tick next to it. I tried to ring her a couple of times. Nothing.
So Martin messaged Tony in the morning about 9:15 and said, what's happening? We can't get hold of Keeley.
He sent a text back to me immediately, within a minute or so, saying, basically agreeing with me, saying, yes, the children, but everything will be fine. We'll work this out, was the impression I got.
So it was almost like a sigh of relief. Okay, so he's going to forgive her for what she's done and they'll be okay and it'll be fine.
Just 45 minutes after Tony Davis texts the McGraths to tell them everything is okay, he calls 999. Paramedics arrive at the scene and immediately notice something isn't right.
She was on the sofa when the ambulance crew first arrived. How did she get from the bottom of the stairs to there? How did the blood get to the various parts? Why is there broken glass in the kitchen? Why are there family picture frames smashed? Why are they removed from the wall?
Keeley has 48 external injuries, 14 broken ribs, 2 collapsed lungs and a fractured skull. Given the extent of her injuries and the evidence of violence at the scene, police are called.
When officers arrived, they found that Davis was stood holding the youngest child. He appeared to be hiding one of his hands. We subsequently established that was because he got injuries on that hand. In the kitchen of the premises, there was evidence of some prior disturbance, some broken glass on the floor, etc. And Keeley's body was partially covered in the living room.
As police and paramedics surround the property, Keeley's parents are 150 miles away, still waiting to hear from her.
He called me up and he said, are you on your own? Are you driving? So the questions he was asking me, I knew I was being set up for some bad news.
And I was there to put him on loudspeaker.
I thought the bad news was going to be something along the lines of, we've split up, I've kicked her out, or she's left, or something to that effect. And then he said, Keeley passed away this morning. To which I kind of went, what? And he said, she died. And again, I kind of didn't, you hear it but don't hear it. And I said, what do you mean?
He said, Keeley's passed away. I said, I'm sorry. Keeley's passed away. She's died. she's really hurt herself. And that was it. It wasn't a long phone call.
He was very keen to end the conversation. It was only a few minutes afterwards. I thought that was a very curt and very short conversation to be told your daughter had died.
Kind of a weird bubble that we were in. There was a few text messages in the next few hours. Martin said, "What's happening? Do we need to come up there? Where are the children? Oh, I'm sorting it. Everything, I'm sorting it. I'll let you know when I know more."
With none of their questions answered, Martin and Claire McGrath raced to be with their grandchildren.
And we had a conversation about the way in which the last couple of hours had sort of happened. So we asked the question, and we sort of verbalised what we were thinking to each other. I said, "You don't think it could have been him, do you?"
He denied any responsibility whatsoever. He maintained his account that she'd fallen down the stairs. She was the one that had the affair. She's the one that broke the family. He blamed her.
Police arriving on the scene know very quickly that something isn't right.
Once a death is declared as suspicious, which happened reasonably quickly, the case is referred to the Major Crime Unit.
For Detective Inspector Fawcett Greaves, his first priority is the evidence that he can gather at the crime scene.
We found blood evidence, signs of disturbance, damaged clothing in the bedroom, and there was blood evidence down the stairs as well. The presence of blood evidence down that stairwell, we needed to look very closely at that.
Davis makes a mistake. He lies to the police about the injuries Keeley has sustained.
Tony Davis generated an account that he had come home in the early hours of the morning and found that Keeley had fallen down the stairs and sustained a series of injuries as a result. The mechanism of injury described by Davis ultimately didn't match the extent of injuries that Keeley had.
He was quite arrogant. Maybe he thought he was going to get away with it, or nobody was really going to care. It does make me wonder whether he was banking on an investigation being dropped, or whether he thought that his respectability, his standing in the community would be enough to win over people, to make them question whether he was even capable of a crime like that.
But police are not fooled. They are immediately suspicious of his demeanour.
He didn't present as a grieving father and husband. I think he maintained his cocky persona.
Further investigations reveals his behaviour that morning doesn't match that of a bereaved partner.
One of the first things that Davis did around 6 a.m, 6:30 in the morning, was take the two older children to nursery. He did that. He kept the youngest with him.
Didn't take the 8-month-old child, so she was left in the house on her own, laying next to her dead mother.
The fact that he staged Keeley's body at some point during that morning, all three of those children must have seen Keeley's body, because they have to have come downstairs to get out of the house to go to nursery. He must have walked them past her, which means all three children have been subjected to that.
It's only after he'd taken the kids to nursery, he'd contacted his friends for support. It's only after that point that he thought it would be the right thing to do to phone the ambulance service, because he didn't care about anything other than himself.
Police take the decision to involve specialist teams to analyse Davis's finances, his movements, and his phone.
His messages to Keeley weren't kind. He held her completely responsible for everything that was happening. He'd spent a period of time ignoring her on the morning. He had considerable text conversations with Keeley's parents. Within those conversations, he blamed Keeley for ruining everything. He asked for help. He portrayed himself as the victim. I don't understand what's happening. What about the kids? What am I going to do from here? But Keeley was dead at that time.
Within hours of arriving at the scene, detectives believe they have enough evidence to arrest Tony Davis.
We then got told that her partner was arrested under suspicion of a murder, and then we were driving up to Derbyshire that evening, a 3-hour drive there to go and collect the children. And I remember asking the police officer at this point, so I asked him 2 questions. First of all, was he absolutely sure in their mind that it was murder rather than anything else? And he said yes, we're sure. And my second question was, are you absolutely sure that it was him? And he said, yes, we're sure.
With Davis now in custody, police begin finding the holes in his story.
Following Davis's arrest, he was taken to his nearest custody suite, where he would have been booked in. We did a full body map examination of Davis whilst in custody. And what that means is we look at every square inch of his body to identify any injury. One of his hands was very severely swollen, which would be evident if you'd expect someone to have punched somebody repeatedly.
Detectives begin a forensic 7-month process of gathering enough evidence they hope will secure a conviction.
As the weeks and months followed and we were given more information about the prosecution case and him as an individual and his character, it became very obvious that he was never going to admit guilt. And so it was going to go to trial and we were going to have a full trial.
By refusing to admit guilt, Davis forces Keeley's family and friends to sit through a trial, listening to the harrowing details of his mental and physical abuse.
So we knew that we were going to hear lots of information and detail that was uncomfortable. So we were prepared, or we prepared ourselves to a degree, but you can't prepare yourself for what you then hear.
Keeley had died as a result of a vicious attack. She had 48 separate injuries, including, I believe, 14 broken ribs. Both her lungs were punctured. She couldn't breathe, and she bled internally, and she suffered greatly.
I felt I needed to know, because if I didn't know, I just speculate. And I guess in my own mind, that was worse.
Sat in the room, listened to everything that had actually happened. I couldn't imagine what she'd went through that night. And then to have walked the kids past her in the morning to take them to nursery.
The degree of her injuries would have meant she was in severe pain, to the point where she would have been crying out.
Just to take some of her pain away. If only I could have done. And I know that when she knew she was dying, because she would have known that she would have wanted me, and not knowing whether she would have asked for me, I'm pretty sure she would have done. But I'll never find out, because he'll never tell me.
Well, he just sat there. When they were showing all the pictures of all her injuries, he didn't even move, didn't even change his face expression.
The only time he apparently showed any emotion was when I read out my victim impact statement. And I think he cried then, but all the way through, he didn't show any emotion. Until he was on the witness stand, then he blubbed.
The pathologist report reveals even more disturbing evidence.
Subsequent forensic testing did establish that there had been recent sexual contact with Davis. Impossible to time exactly when, but putting all of those features together, I remain convinced that during the course of that attack, Davis raped Keeley.
We heard so much horrific detail. To hear that your daughter was raped, and for that not to be the worst thing you heard that day, kind of puts that in perspective.
I think I needed it to go through the court. I guess because she hadn't told us anything, I needed to know something of what, I had to listen to what she'd gone through. As a mother, I had to know what she'd gone through.
Keeley's parents attended every day of their trial, listening just feet from their daughter's killer.
Martin and Claire stood there and heard details of every injury. They heard details of how those injuries were sustained, how long it took place, the sexual element.
He looked at me. I'm not entirely sure whether he nodded or whether he just looked at me, and I just continued staring at him. And after about 3 or 4 seconds, I guess, of eye contact, he looked away. And I remember thinking to myself, he's guilty.
The jury was sent out Friday lunchtime, and we were told, you know, if it comes back quick, it could mean it's a guilty verdict. And they didn't come back.
Keeley's family had an agonising weekend before the verdict would be given.
Then we went back on the Monday morning, and within a couple of hours, I think it was about 11 o'clock, we were called back in. And it was guilty.
I very clearly remember seeing Martin and Claire directly in front of me, and I saw the weight disappear from their shoulders physically, and it was extremely emotional.
He got life, a minimum of 24 years. I think it doesn't bring Keeley back, but I think it's more than we expected.
To those in court, it appears that Tony Davis believes he can manipulate everybody around him.
Davis had friends in court. It was evident that they were associates or affiliated to him. There were some people, to the very end, that didn't believe he'd done it. And I think that simply shows how controlling that man can be.
It annoyed me more that we knew and he knew, but for some stupid reason, he thought it sort of hoodwinked us. He thought I'd believe him. Before the trial had even started, you know, that little nod to me, as if to say, you know, hi, or we were on the same side, or whatever message he was trying to convey, suggested that he thought that, you know, he could persuade me, or had persuaded me, that he hadn't done it, and that annoyed me even more.
When he arrived in prison following his conviction, it was evident very quickly that he had begun manipulating and trying to control prison staff to present himself as the victim, to present himself as a vulnerable individual, as opposed to the monster that we all know he really is.
Thanks to the detailed and forensic investigation led by Detective Inspector Fawcett Greaves, jurors convict Tony Davis for the murder of Keeley McGrath.
It's just a jigsaw puzzle that eventually we managed to put together.
Together, Martin and Claire now work to remember her life rather than her death.
I identified her. Martin couldn't do it. I had to. And people said, you know, how can you do that? It was awful. It's the worst thing I've ever done. But I had to, because I brought her into the world. You know, I had to say goodbye. But I don't focus on that, because there's so many other funny things and pictures and videos that we do have. It doesn't take up my mind.
We could be silly to each other and gross each other out, and she would respond to it in the same way that I would. So that was fun.
I've got a video of her actually in labour with the youngest child, and she was in pain but laughing. She laughed. She had a funny laugh and shook her head when she laughed. And she's there telling me to stop it, and, you know, and just... So I can watch that and it's okay.